The war in Ukraine has not only reshaped geopolitics, but also sent shockwaves through global energy markets. Europe has turned away from Russian oil and gas, and the US has emerged as a net exporter, and Asia has stepped in to absorb discounted Russian supplies. But with growing speculation about the possibility of a peace deal, whether a full settlement or just a compromise, the big question is what happens next. Today, we'll explore the potential impact on oil, gas, and the balance of power in global energy with Marco Saggese, StoneX Vice President of Clearing and Execution Sales. Thank you for joining us, Marco.
Thank you.
So, how has the war in Ukraine reshaped the global energy market so far?
Well, the first thing that happened after the war started, in order to try and make things more difficult for Russia, the Western governments imposed sanctions on their primary industries, the oil and gas. So they put a price cap on how much they could sell the crude oil at $60, and they also banned any imports into Europe and the US. So that reshaped the whole thing, so that the market share of the Russian export to Europe completely collapsed. And Europe then had to find other sources to be able to go and find some energy supplies. And they've done that through various different ways, Middle East and the United States. So then actually the United States ended up becoming a net exporter for the first time as a result of the sanctions in place. So where does that leave Russia? Russia then had to find alternative sources to go and supply. And they were able to find that through India, China, and Turkey primarily. And despite the lower prices, they were able to supply them. But it also in turn made these countries more competitive as they were buying crude oil at a cheaper price. So basically the supply chains moved directions as a result of the outbreak of the war.
So what could a full peace deal mean for oil and gas markets?
I think if we had a full peace deal, initially Russia would immediately ask for all sanctions to be lifted. So they would be looking to then to resupply Europe again. And for sure they would regain quite a lot of that market. By basic geography, they are closer to Europe than anybody else. And the supply lines, particularly with the gas pipelines, infrastructure is already in place. For Europe, on the meantime, they wouldn't want that situation to arise again where they were so reliant on Russia. So they might well maintain some of their other sources that they've been using for the last few years to be able to maintain energy supplies coming into the country. And in effect, that would probably end up with US losing a little bit of the market share simply because of the logistics of moving stuff over to Europe and Russia being a lot closer. The extent by which we'll see the shift in supply chains of that will come down to pricing. And again, if there was still some sort of restrictions on pricing, then perhaps it would be more attractive to actually bring the Russian oil in because it might actually be cheaper. So that's very dependent on a lot of different factors, how the effect of a full peace deal would be.
And what do you think is the most likely outcome, and how would that affect the energy market?
Well, I think one of the possibilities that people are looking at right now is a possible compromise. And this would probably end up with the sanctions remaining in place. And Europe will certainly tread very carefully and cautiously in those situations, and wouldn't necessarily want to give full go-ahead to Russia to be able to export. Effectively, the supply chains would remain very similar, and so we still see a lot of the supply chains still going out to China, India, and Turkey, and Europe would try and maintain its independence away from their reliance on Russian oil. But we have wait to see what actually is going to happen, because the possibilities can be lots, shall we say, and it's very, very difficult to predict which way it's going to go.
Completely. And how important is China's role in shaping the future of Russia's energy exports and Western policy?
So that's quite an interesting question, I think, because it comes more as a default situation, because as we trying to find a solution to the Ukraine war, the West has tried to put pressure on countries not to trade or deal with Russian energy. So we've seen some tariffs increased in India, basically doubling any energy coming out of India if it's coming from a Russian source. And so we saw actually recently increased buying coming from India up to the point when the tariffs came in, and we've seen a reduction since then. What this means is it's just that anything that India is not buying is now soaked up by China. So with the supply from Russia now going mainly to China, and China aligning itself with Russia in this respect, it's creating a little bit of stronghold in that part of the world. And with India now also being put under pressure, they all met at the weekend in China, and the alignment for them seems to make sense in the current situation. So China's role has become far more important in the decision making for the Western world in its ability to find a solution to the Ukraine war.
Thank you very much for your analysis once again, Marco.
My pleasure. Thank you.
For more videos like this, please do like and subscribe.